One of the things about substances is that it actually helps to change chemistry in the brain and body. So there becomes a chemical dependence on it at that point. But the person who wants to change has to want to change. That's the first element. In other words, no one can make you change, but you have to find it in you to really see if this is what you want to do. And I've studied people over the last 12 years. Why is it that one person, an old-timer, can look at his x-rays and see a spot on his lungs, and the doctor will say to him, "Hey, George, that's a spot on your lungs. It's nothing now, but if you keep smoking, it will be." And that guy just takes his cigarettes, throws them in the trash, and he's done the next day. How do you explain that? He made the decision, and the decision was an experience, and it began to rewrite his chemistry and his biology. Hey, how can a person who moves into a state of religious ecstasy, a state of absolute faith, drink strychnine and not get poisoned by it? It's a decision. People then who actually want to make the decision to change have to make the decision with firm intention. Well, there's 1,300 different chemicals that are released that stimulate your immune system, that cause regeneration and repair in the body.
Really?
And those 1,300 chemicals are profound chemicals that actually lengthen telomeres as well. And it's the greatest pharmacy in the world.
Yes.
So now it turns out that 10 minutes of gratitude a day releases a chemical called immunoglobulin A, the primary defense against bacteria and viruses. 10 minutes of anger or impatience or frustration or fear turns on 1,200 different chemicals that causes the body to mobilize energy and suppresses the immune system. So then the person who's feeling gratitude and those elevated emotions in the morning, and you check their blood values of IgA, immunoglobulin A, at the end of the day, it's still elevated. In other words, it lasts. You just took the shot. You took the flu shot, and it's going to protect you against bacteria and viruses. Now, here's the truth. Germs don't make you sick. We make ourselves sick. And if you're in a company where everybody's getting infected and they're all sick at the same time, it's not the bug. It's they're all stressed, and they're all susceptible. They're called opportunistic bacteria because they're waiting for an opportunity to proliferate if your immune system is compromised. So people need to know the truth about this because they're programmed into believing that germs make them sick. So there's no germ out there with your name on it that's waiting to attack you. We have just as many microorganisms in our body as we have cells. So it's just the way in which we manage our internal states. The ultimate truth is oneness, that everything else is a diminishing of that. So if you understand biologically where oneness occurs, it occurs right here in the heart center. And what if you took 10 minutes out of your day, 15 minutes out of your day, to rest your attention in that center? Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. To cultivate an elevated emotion like gratitude, or joy, or the joy for existence, or the love of life, or compassion, and you felt it deeply. Do you know that the moment energy moves into your heart, the field around your body expands to 9 meters wide? When you're living in survival and you're living in fear and anxiety and anger and hostility and violence and sadness and guilt, you're drawing from this invisible field and you're turning it into chemistry. And the field around your body shrinks. Now you're more matter and less energy. You're more particle and less wave. And you don't have any energy to actually for long-term building projects like growth and repair or to create anything you want in your life. Turns out that the heart has a magnetic field, so it's like dropping a pebble in the water. And if you can sustain that emotional state, now you are dropping pebble after pebble and it's sending ripples out. The more profound you feel, the more passionate, more enriched you feel, the bigger the stone you're dropping in the water, the bigger the wave. Now, all frequency, all energy carries information. So that's the magnetic charge. So what is the information? It's the intention. It's the mind now. So then you then send an intention on that wave. You have a clear intention, and that information is being carried on that frequency wave. Now you're broadcasting an electromagnetic signature into the field. And so then when you're living in survival, you're always trying to control the outcome, force the outcome, predict the outcome. And when you do that, you're in your own way because you're matter trying to influence matter, and it's going to take a certain amount of time. We call that three-dimensional creation. Fifth-dimensional creation is the opposite. You're actually not going anywhere. You are the vortex that's calling the experience to you.
Wow.
So then when you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, When there's a vibrational match between your energy and that potential in the quantum field, it's like taking a tuning fork and hitting the tuning fork, and you have another one, and that one is going to produce the same harmonic. Now there's a vibrational match. And the longer you can sustain that energy, or better yet, the faster the frequency, the more elevated the emotion, the faster in time it happens. And you teach people how to do that properly. They would never try to control the outcome. They trust in the outcome because this is the center where you trust the unknown. So now you're laying down the very thing that you've done because you don't feel separate from possibility. You're not a materialist defining reality with your senses, which occurs primarily from the hormones of stress. Actually, the opposite is happening. Your heart is open and you feel connected to something greater. And it's none of your business on when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. Because if you can predict when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen, it's not an unknown.
Back to matter.
Let's just say that you wake up in the morning and you do the same things and you see the same people and you go to the same places and you drink coffee out of your same mug and you drive to work the same way and you see the same people that push the same emotional buttons. We could say that it's the external environment, the outer world, all the people you know and the things that you do and the places that you go. Your external environment is turning on different circuits in your brain, causing you to consciously or unconsciously think equal to everything that you know. And as long as you react and think equal to everything you know, you keep creating more of the same life. The principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. So if you keep thinking the same thoughts, if you keep performing the same actions, if you keep living by the same emotions, over time the redundancy of that begins to hardwire the brain into very specific patterns. And that pattern then becomes our identity or our personality. Learning is making new synaptic connections, as we'll see in a minute. And remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. So most people, at a certain point in their life, they keep thinking the same way. They hardwire their brain into a certain pattern. They keep doing the same things that create habits that become part of their identity. And they keep living by the same emotions that are created from the same experiences. And the redundancy and repetition of that begins to cause the brain to fire in very finite networks. And that becomes what we call our identity. So then by the time we're 35 years old, psychology says that for the most part, we're a set of memorized behaviors and emotional reactions that make up who we are as an identity. So when it comes time to change, and people have to realize that 5% of their conscious mind is working against 95% of what they've memorized subconsciously.
Wow.
So it's kind of like mind and body working in opposition. So that becomes very difficult to change because we're using a very small percentage to go against what we've subconsciously memorized. Well, there's a new science emerging called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity says that you're in fact changed biologically by every thought you think, every new thing you learn, every new experience that you create, every new choice that you make, every new dream that you dream, your brain begins to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make the brain work differently, you're changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. So most people then, at a certain point in their life, they stop learning and they start feeling. And when feelings become the barometer for change, we'll always talk ourselves out of greatness, because when you change, it means that you're going to have to come out of your resting state, number one, and number two, you're going to have to feel a little uncomfortable. So the moment we start to feel uncomfortable, most people go, oh, I want to return back to that familiar identity. So if you have a thought, every time you have a thought, you make a chemical in your brain. If you have a great thought or an unlimited thought, you turn on a set of circuits in your brain in a very specific sequence and pattern that produces a level of mind that signals another part of your brain for you to begin to feel exactly the way you were just thinking, great or unlimited. If you have a negative thought or an unhappy thought, you turn on a different set of neural networks and a different combination and sequence that produces a different level of mind, that turns on a different blend of chemicals for you to feel exactly the way you were just thinking, negative or unhappy. Now, the moment you begin to feel the way you think, because the brain is in constant communication with your body, you begin to think the way you feel. So you begin to feel the way you think and think the way you feel and feel the way you think. And the cycle of thinking and feeling over time conditions the body to memorize that emotion better than the conscious mind. Whenever the body knows better than the mind, that's called a habit. Habit is when the body is the mind. Now, thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. So when you begin to think and feel in a certain cycle, you create a state of being. Now, as I said, 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors in which it's subconsciously running behind the scenes of our awareness. Here's a great example. You can't consciously remember a phone number. Well, you'd have to be over 35 for this, but you can't consciously remember a phone number, but you walk over to the receiver and you pick it up and you look at the dial pad and your fingers dial the number. You can't remember your ATM number, but your fingers can remember it. So you practiced it so many times that your body knows better than your brain. Now, 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old are those set of memorized subconscious automatic programs. So by 35, we pretty much figured it all out neurologically, become hardwired. So now the person wants to think positively, but they've been feeling negatively for the last, 25 years. They want to create a new life and, create a new vision for themselves, but they feel guilty. That's mind and body working in opposition. We have to recondition the body to a new mind. And when the body becomes the mind, then when I said to change is to think greater than the body, what I mean by that is we have to think greater than the memorized emotions that the body has recognized or become familiar with. Well, stress is when the body's knocked out of balance. And when you're being chased by a lion, thousands of years ago, you turned on a primitive nervous system to mobilize all of this energy to prepare you for some threat or event in your external environment. And when you mobilize all that energy, you're really saying, I got to take care of this body, I got to become aware of my environment, and how much time do I have to get there? So what was once highly adaptive, which means if you're being chased by a lion, you better make sure that you have enough energy to either fight or run. But now if you're thinking about, firing an employee, and you know that this person has a wife that's sick, and they have 4 children, and you know that they actually need the job more than the other person who's going to stay, and you begin to think about that over and over again, you're turning on the stress response just by thought alone. And what was once highly adaptive now becomes very maladaptive, because no organism in nature can survive under long-term stress.
Long-term stress.
Yeah.